Every single cell in our body has a molecular clock, and this molecular clock influences the behavior of that cell, and that includes when that cell is utilizing carbs, when it's utilizing fat, when it's helping us lose weight, and when it's not. Gone are the days where just what we eat matters. It's now more about what time we eat. And that influences a lot. In fact, it might even influence a little bit more than what we eat. That's how much times are changing. So what are the best times to eat for maximum fat loss based upon the true evidence? Let's jump right into the research. This is fascinating stuff. The first time is allocating your calories towards the morning. Now, if you've watched my videos, I talk about this a lot, so you may want to skip, but don't, because I've got some new evidence that really shines some cool light on stuff. There was a study published in the journal Obesity that had subjects eat a 700 calorie breakfast, a 500 calorie lunch, and a 200 calorie dinner, and then flip-flop. 200 calorie breakfast, 500 calorie lunch, and 700 calorie dinner. Exact same amount of calories throughout the course of the day, exact same macronutrients, exact same times, just flipped in terms of the calorie allocation. Results were unreal. Despite eating the same amounts of food, the group that ate the larger amount of calories in the morning lost significantly more weight, had a significant reduction in their waist size, they had lower fasting insulin, lower glucose, lower triglycerides, they had better postprandial glucose tolerance, meaning they handled the carbohydrates from a meal better, and lastly, they had massive improvements in their hunger. So we used to think, okay, eating breakfast like a king, lunch like a prince, and dinner like a pauper is great because eating a big breakfast would keep you satiated. That is absolutely true, but that may not be the main reason. Based upon looking at biomarkers, massive things are changing, not just hunger. So let's dive a little bit deeper. The American Journal of Clinical Nutrition published a paper looking at what's called dietary-induced thermogenesis. So this is looking at how we are literally incinerating and burning fuel at different times of the day. They had subjects eat the exact same meal at 9 a.m., 5 p.m., and 1 a.m. And they used something called calorimetry to measure how much they were overall burning fuel. So with this, they measured this 1 hour before they ate, 1 hour after they ate, and 6 hours after they ate to see what happened to the metabolism. Okay, well, there was significantly more calorie burning happening at the earlier hours of the day. So there was more dietary-induced thermogenesis with breakfast than there was with lunch, and significantly more with lunch than there was with dinner. So first place would be eat as many of your calories as you can early in the morning. Second place would be eat as many of your calories as you can for lunch. And third place, and probably shouldn't be done, is eating most of your calories for dinner. The simple equation here is that your body utilizes fuels better in the morning. Now we have to break this down a little bit more nuanced. Should you eat more carbs in the morning, or should you eat more fat in the morning? Now, this is one of those things where we're constantly learning new stuff. Now, for a long time, we thought, okay, eat the bulk of your fats in the morning, because that is when, from a gene expression side of things, you have less potential to store that fat. That is still true, but now we have a second part to this equation. Now we have learned that your body can oxidize fuels from carbohydrates really well in the morning. So what does this mean? Should you eat more carbs or should you eat more fats? Well, it depends on if you're active or not. That's what's crazy. So there's a study published in the journal Current Biology, and it evaluated what is called the respiratory quotient. A respiratory quotient is essentially a relative measurement of the utilization of different fuels, carbs versus fat. And it found that the respiratory quotient was highest in the morning, indicating that the body had the ability to burn through carbs faster in the morning. Well, burning through carbs doesn't really matter a whole lot unless you're physically burning those carbs. So, here's the interesting caveat here. Because of insulin sensitivity and the insulin sensitivity of our muscle cells in the morning, eating carbs in the morning could work to your advantage if you're going to be active that day. If you're not going to be active that day, it's not going to work to your advantage. And I'll explain a little bit more about how that is. You see, you need to be able to keep your finger on the pulse of what you're doing that day. I think that's not a lot to ask. I think that's a little bit of responsibility we all agree we can take on, right? If you know you're going to be active today, then you're going to have carbohydrates, have those carbs in the morning. Now, not everyone has to have carbs. You don't have to. And I have more to explain about when you should eat fats, because fats in the morning work too, but you need to be aware of what your day looks like. Now, you can also measure this a little bit by looking at your glucose. So for example, if you take a look at your glucose and you find that your glucose is staying really high and it's not coming down, that's a very clear time that maybe you should either become more active that day or you should reduce your carbohydrate intake that day. And it really can change from day to day. That's what gets a little bit sketchy. I recommend wearing a continuous glucose monitor if you haven't tried that already. A continuous glucose monitor can give you feedback in real time. Like if you were to eat a high carb breakfast and you spiked higher than you normally would, that means that, okay, maybe you should reduce the carbohydrates a little bit that day, or maybe you should get moving a little bit more to utilize those, since clearly they're not getting sucked up into the muscle as well. I popped a link down below for a company called Signos. I'm on the advisory board with them. That's a continuous glucose monitor through Dexcom, but also with a really unique technology with their algorithm to help kind of machine learn where your glucose trends are and help you understand when you should kind of reduce carbohydrates, when you should exercise more. In fact, if you overdo carbohydrates, it'll even send you a notification that says, hey, your glucose is spiking, you need to move, you need to do squats, you need to do push-ups, do something. So it keeps you ahead of the game, but it also allows you to learn and thereby can coach you a little bit better through your learning and through what the algorithm learns about your blood sugar. So really interesting stuff. So I popped a link down below that'll save you 15% as well. So 15% off through Signos. You get the continuous glucose monitor so you can watch in real time and access to the Signos app, of course. So that link is down below in the description right below this video. Now, we have to look at some more data with a study that was published in BMC Medical Genomics. This is one of my favorite studies that I've referenced for years because it talks about what is called gene expression. It talks about different genes that are expressed. And what we've found is that there are more fat storage genes in the evening than there are in the morning. So that means you have a harder time gaining fat in the morning, which also implies that it might be a good time to eat more fat because you have a less likelihood of storing fat as fat in the morning. What's confusing here, and where you're probably getting a little bit lost, and I hope to clear up, is that I just told you to eat more carbs in the morning. Now I'm insinuating that it's better to eat more fat in the morning. Well, that's where, again, you have to understand what your day looks like. So rule number one is the bulk of your calories should be in the morning, whether they're fats or carbs. So everyone should kind of follow that. Unless you're fasting, that's a different category. If you're going to be moving a lot that day, allocate your carbs to the morning because you'll use them better. If you're going to be more sedentary that day, you should allocate your fats to the morning because you'll have a less likelihood of storing them. Remember that fats are still very calorically dense. So fats can store as fat very easily if you go overboard. Even though fat burns as fat, fat still stores as fat. So you look at your day, you're like, I'm going to be in the office all day. Not a good idea to eat a bunch of carbs. You look at your day, you're like, hey, I'm going to be walking around a lot. I'm going to be at the theme park with the kids, whatever. That's a good day to have most of your carbs allocated to the morning. Now let's talk about another time to maximize your fat loss with your meal timing. And this is more about what you should not do, okay? We were told for years and years and years that eating right after your workout would allow you to recover better. Well, we now know that that's not the truth. Protein synthesis stays elevated for 24 hours, 48 hours after a workout. So right after your workout, it doesn't matter if you eat or not. As a matter of fact, you might be doing yourself a disservice. So what's wild is that after your workout, your heart rate stays elevated. Fat oxidation stays elevated for 15, 30, sometimes a couple of hours even. So what that means is you're still burning fat after your workout, which means you have a prime time to capitalize on free fat burning. The moment that you eat and spike insulin, you stop that. So let's not do that. Now, the other interesting thing is there's a study published in Nutrients that suggests if you eat carbohydrates right after your workout, like within 30 minutes of your workout, you actually can decrease the insulin sensitivity benefits you get from that workout. So working out improves insulin sensitivity. That's a given. But if you replace the carbohydrates that you burned right after your workout, it actually nullifies the benefits. We're seeing this in relatively recent research. So the minimum time that you have after your workout before you should eat is 30 minutes. At the very least, give it 30 minutes after your workout. Otherwise, you're missing out on prime insulin sensitivity improvement time and prime fat burning real estate right there. Okay, so let's recap with a few other little tips that we can add in here. Rule number 1, don't eat late no matter what. Okay, whether it's fats, proteins, carbs, try not to eat close to bed. That's a given, but especially carbohydrates. Rule number 2 is don't eat too early. So everything that I taught you, you don't want to roll out of bed and say, oh, it's time to eat. Why? Because when you wake up in the morning, your insulin levels are probably going to be at the lowest they will be all day, which means you are in a primo spot to burn fat. Whether you choose to use that time period to work out or not is on you. But the simplicity of it is that 1, 2, 3 hour window right when you wake up, your body is primed to utilize fats at that time. So don't disrupt it. Even if you allocate your calories to a bigger breakfast, eat your breakfast a little bit later, not right when you wake up. The other reason behind this is we now know that a very large percentage of people are developing insulin resistance and diabetes. And if you're dealing with insulin resistance, you're going to have to deal with something called the dawn phenomenon, which is in the morning, your glucose levels are very high, but you also have high levels of cortisol, high levels of glucagon, and higher circulating levels of human growth hormone, all which impede the effects of insulin. So what that means is that if you are dealing with insulin resistance and you eat first thing in the morning, you're going to run into a problem. That problem is that cortisol is going to make it so that insulin can't really do its job right, and your glucose is going to spike even higher than it ordinarily would. High levels of circulating glucose are going to make it so that insulin levels have to go even higher, and that's going to make it so that glucose is circulating back to the liver and goes into fat storage. So it's simple to just wait a couple hours after you get up and things will simmer down a little bit. Now the last one is if you're going to have carbohydrates, have them around your exercise, okay? Like you can have them before, you can have them during, but just don't have them right after. If you feel like you must have carbs, the simplicity of it is that if you move and you utilize those carbs, they won't be detrimental. So recapping, foods in the morning, but not too early in the morning. Carbs if you're gonna be active, fats if you're gonna be sedentary, okay? Carbohydrates no earlier than 30 minutes after your workout, and these are gonna allow you to maximize the amount of fat burning you get with your meals. I'll see you tomorrow.